So here we go. Welcome everyone to Looking Back and Looking Ahead in the Spirit of Dr. King. This evening, Martin Luther King Day, January 17th, 2022. Our agenda for tonight is just some brief event housekeeping. Then I will give a welcome to everyone who's joining us. And then we'll have a conversation and some remarks with our guests, Karen Tabb, the artist behind the exhibition from Beacon Gallery that's closing today, Humanity is Not a Spectator Sport, Clementina Sherry of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, Ruth Messenger of the American Jewish World Service, Michelina of What Now? Making Space, another Beacon Gallery exhibition that accompanies Humanity is Not a Spectator Sport that's closing this evening, and also an artist and activist, and closing remarks by Laura Mandel, the Executive Director of JARTS. So, as our housekeeping for all of you who are joining us, this is an event sponsored by Beacon Gallery and JARTS. It will be recorded and will be available for replay on Beacon Gallery's website, or page, I should say, on YouTube. You should have access to putting comments and questions to the panelists and myself in the chat. We've tried to limit people's ability to be interactive just based on some previous experiences. Hopefully that won't inhibit you from enjoying yourselves this evening. So many of you have seen this slide before. I will keep it short. Beacon Gallery is a contemporary art gallery that I, Christine O'Donnell, founded and opened in Boston in 2017. We have a focus on activism and social justice, and we do lots of different exhibitions, and those include things that are themes of feminism, immigration, and increasing representation of our society in the art world. We are also working on deconstructing the art world's culture of elitism through accessibility, transparency, and education. So the exhibition of Karen Tabb's that's closing tonight, after a wonderful, wonderful long run, we're sad to see it go, is Humanity is Not a Spectator Sport. We have lots of content that will still be online on our YouTube channel and on our website. So if you did miss it, do not despair. There are ways to interact with it. And we have an amazing catalog that's still available as well. Michelina's What Now? Making Space has been a fabulous complimentary exhibition for the show also, featuring 7 different artists, and she'll be telling us more about that this evening. And the works from that exhibition are also available to be viewed on Beacon Gallery's website. Up next at Beacon Gallery, we have 2 exhibitions coming up this winter and spring. Malcolm Montague Davis Retrospective, which opens February 4th and goes through March 13th. And then The Infinite Figure, featuring Ibrahim Ali Salam, Sima Schloss, and Jamal Thorne, March 18th through May 30th. We hope you'll join us for one of the events we're planning for those 2 exhibitions. So before we get started and I talk about and introduce you to all our guests, I did have a few thoughts that I wanted to share on this special day. My quote, we're all going to share a quote this evening, is, "We must come to see that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of men and women, I would say, willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation." And I would say that Beacon Gallery is working to push forward that human progress, that we know that the wheels of inevitability are not going where we want them to go. And we are wanting to work to push things in the direction of social justice. So, looking back and looking forward in the head of the spirit of Dr. King, what does all of this mean for Beacon Gallery? Social justice means work and not complacency. It means a continued dedication to real and not performative activism and open dialogue with artists, community, and beyond, and how we can do good and how we can do better. So that means that email me. You have comments, you have questions, you want to talk, send me a note. Concretely, join us on the Louis D. Brown Mother's Day Walk for Peace coming up this May. See the QR code on your screen? You can come and join our team. Read books with us, like the ones from Karen's exhibition. They're all on our blog. And pay attention as we launch our 501c3 dedicated to bringing increased racial equity to arts institutions. Contact me to find out more or pay attention this coming year, 2022 into 2023. And my final comment and thought is we all have time, talent, or treasure, usually not enough of all three. What do you have to give? So we have some amazing panelists this evening that we're going to hear from. This is the list of everyone. And first, we're going to be hearing from Karen Tabb. It's the most fabulous exhibition that we're very sad to say goodbye to this evening. And she is in the gallery. Now, Karen was born in apartheid South Africa. She's raised on a farm in Israel and has been a resident of the US for the last 20 years, most recently in the Boston area. And I even have one of her pieces as my backdrop this evening. It makes a great backdrop. She came to art after a career in the nonprofit world, and her conceptual mixed media and installation pieces address issues of social inequality. She has a BA in education and an MA in nonprofit management, both from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. She's married to Kevin Tabb, the CEO of Beth Israel Lahey Health in Boston, and has two children, Shai and Noam. Karen, thank you so much for being with us this evening. I'm going to switch over now and put up this image and let you take the stage.
Sure. So you're looking at a picture of Dr. King and Rabbi Cy Dresner, who died last week. Rabbi Dresner died at the age of 92. He was a freedom rider, and he was arrested 4 times while working on behalf of himself and as a representative of the Jewish community in the name of civil liberties and civil justice and equality and against racism. And I say that because I feel like I stand on the shoulders of other giants, and not that I'm a giant, but I stand on the shoulders of giants, of people in my Jewish community who have been dedicated to this cause for forever. And I am reading a quote from Dr. King's letter from while he was in jail. And he says, I'm cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with a narrow provincial outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds. And so the reason I chose that quote is because it speaks directly to the work in the show and how I view my role today as a white Jewish female artist living in America and reckoning with my whiteness and reckoning with my Judaism as it relates to my role as a feminist artist. And so I'm looking around the gallery, and it's extremely fulfilling to see this body of work and sad at the same time to see it come down, but that is the story of every artist. But it's also been an unbelievable opportunity for a number of reasons. One is to collaborate with the women who are on the screen in front of you. Every single one of them has touched my life and affected me in ways beyond imagination. So to Christine for your generosity of spirit and opening up the gallery to every idea and every collaboration with any group, nonprofit possible. I truly am thankful. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to work with people who I would not necessarily have had the opportunity to work with. And Makilina, I'm looking at you, because we come from different backgrounds, and perhaps if it was not for this show, our paths might never have crossed. But through your eyes, I've seen and learned a lot about what it means to be a Black artist, a female artist in America today, and the vulnerability and the pain and the hardship that that you have so beautifully poured into the piece that is in the show today, but also the strength that you bring and the fortitude of your activism. And I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to have met the artists that you've brought into the show. Clementina, your strength, wisdom, light, fortitude, and belief have taught me what might be possible and what is possible in the shadow of deep sadness. And the tzedakah box that I made for in honor of Clementina in the show, along with the one that you're seeing on the screen right now, along with the one that I made for Ruth, are inspiring the next iteration of Be the Change. And that is the box that I made in honor of Ruth Messenger, who has inspired me as a Jewish professional, who's inspired me as a thoughtful leader, a force to reckon with in terms of social justice and promoting change. And these two tzedakah boxes will lead the charge for this incredible project that will launch in May in Boston through JARTS. Laura and I get into a lot of good trouble together as it relates to imagining what might be possible in the Jewish world vis-a-vis arts, culture, food, fashion, whatever you name it. How can we use art as a form of artivism, of activism, to create a better world? I often open the newspaper in the morning and find myself overwhelmed beyond imagination. The problems are insurmountable, the problems are unimaginable, and the hurt is so deep. And I think a lot of people turn off when that happens. And one of the young women who visited the show said to me, well, what can I do? I feel so overwhelmed. And I said to that young woman, I say to whomever asks me, is that we each have one gift to give, as Christine said. And if we pick one thing and we keep going at it, we might be able to promote change. And so I leave you with this encouragement to pick that one cause, to make a difference in one area, in one neighborhood, on one street, in the place that you live. If you touch one life, you would have done, as the Talmud says, you would have saved many. And so I leave you with that, and I pass it on to back to you, Christine.
Thank you, Karen. That was beautiful. And such the perfect way to end things is, yes, for all of us to think about how can we get involved. Unfortunately, none of us on our own can save the world, and we can't get involved with every cause. And so I think often it feels overwhelming, like we can't we're paralyzed by indecision. But we can remember that many small actions, the tiny mosquito can keep the human awake all night. And so if we can each be that tiny mosquito, and I, of everyone, am very great at being a pest. So, if we each do that, we can make a difference. Even if it's a small one in the beginning, all of those little actions can mean something. So don't let anyone tell you that what you're doing isn't important, even if it's small. And now we are going to go on to Clementina Sherry and the Lewis D. Brown Peace Institute. Clementina, we're so happy to have you this evening. Lewis D. Brown Peace Institute was founded by Clementina Sherry and Joseph in 1994 to honor their son and continue his legacy and the peacemaking work which he had started before his tragic murder. Their goals were to teach young people the values and continue to be to teach young people the values of peace, focus on the assets of the community, and support survivors of homicide victims. They founded the Survivors Outreach Services, SOS program, to deliver consistent and coordinated services to survivors, which is now across the country. And they have the Mother's Day Walk for Peace, Sunday, May 8th, 2022. Register via the QR codes that you will see. Clementine, I'm going to pass it over to you, and I'm going to go to the next page, which has where you can donate or register.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What an honor it is to be, I'm always in awe when I'm in spaces with amazing women doing amazing work. And especially tonight in honoring the legacy of Dr. King. The quote that I selected was, we know there's so many quotes, but the quote that I selected that I felt is speaking to where I am and what I'm being called to do, says, as my suffering mounted, I soon realized that there were two ways in which I could respond to my situation. I could either react with bitterness or seek to transform the suffering into a creative force. I decided to follow the latter course. I often tell people that after Lewis was killed is when I woke up. I lived in my community, heard on the news, and it continues to hear, young Black men, young Black teenage boys being caught in crossfires. And then that narrative would, come up. Well, there were drug deal gone bad, was a gang involved shooting. They were known to the police. And there was always this sense of, breathing a sigh of relief, because that could never happen to me. I was one of those good mothers. I donated to the church. I gave to the needy. I just did everything God wanted me to do. And yet it happened to me. And so when Lewis was killed is when I woke up, because those were the narratives that I heard. Tina, was it a drug deal gone bad? Was he in DYS? Was he? So the media really portrayed who this young Black teen was. And so for me, I wanted to change that narrative. I wanted to really look at who Lewis was and really to show society that people of colors, we don't raise our children to kill or to be killed. And so I wanted to give back. I wanted to transform my pain and anger into power and action. And my first place was working at the hospital. I left the hospital empty-handed, physically and within my soul. At that time, there were really no resources for families impacted by murder, especially if you look like me. And so there was a justification as to why things happened. The first project that we did was working within the schools. We wanted to provide a space for the teachers and the young people. How do you teach the value of peace? And we worked with the Boston Public Schools, and we really looking at this young Black child's life. He wanted to be the first Black president of the United States. How do we talk about teaching peace in the midst of violence when that's all we hear? So we work with the Boston Public Schools and our teachers, and we started the peace curriculum, the Lewis D. Brown Peace Curriculum for 10th grade, teaching peace through literature and community service learning. Now, the curriculum was the first in the country that included the teaching of loss and grief as part of our children's social skills. Now we call it social emotional learning. Our curriculum was also cited by the former Attorney General Janet Reno in 1996 in One City Success Story, a report that she put out. The peace curriculum contributed to the reduction of juvenile crime in the city of Boston. That's an amazing lesson to celebrate. But then what happened is, this thing called the Boston Miracle came and everything got defunded. So we couldn't talk about violence. We couldn't talk about the problem anymore because everything was about the Boston Miracle. Well, 28 years later, here we are. We're still dealing with the issue of murder, trauma, grief, and loss. And to add to that, COVID. So being here, being a part of this work, being a part of this exhibit has really given me the opportunity to stop and to look as to where we're going forward. As a nonprofit, as an immigrant woman of color, I realize that I am not going to conform to the way society thinks I should be, I shouldn't be. So for me, looking ahead, where are we going? What are we doing? I really want to revolutionize philanthropy at the grassroots level. Our ultimate goal is really audacious. I don't just want to focus on promoting the narrative of ending gun violence. I really want to work to build a national understanding movement of waging peace. And so we are investing in equipping survivors with the tools, resources, and opportunities that they all need to become architects of their own inner healing while advocating for social change. And this really happens through our Inform, Influence, and Impact grant. How do we give? How do we give? And I took this part of the work because of what was given to me after Lewis was killed and after we started doing this work. Didn't know how to create a budget if you paid me. People couldn't understand, Tina, how are you doing this work when your numbers just don't match? And so I learned there's a quote that I want to share in addition to the one that I read. And he says, they have the will, they have the creativity, they lack the means. You give them the means. The Lenny Zakem Fund was an organization that really, truly invested in us in the beginning of our work. Lenny Zakem trusted us, trusted someone who didn't know what I was doing by investing in us. And so I take a page out of the Lenny Zakem Fund, and that's where the Inform, Influence, and Impact grant is coming. Mind you, we're not rich. We're still looking for the resources, yet we want to invest in those survivors, those families just like me, who through our pain, through our anger, are really are finding our purpose and want to bring peace into a society and really transform the way people view communities of colors. So I just want to thank you so much. And yes, please, we hope you will join us. The Mothers That Walk for Peace is our largest fundraiser that will give us the resources that we need to invest in our community and to invest in peace and to create this generation of peace. Thank you.
Clementina, that was so beautiful. And I hope that you and everyone else will take a chance to read some of the quotes that are in the chat as well. Words of love and support that are in there for you, which are beautiful to see. That was incredibly moving and inspirational. And I will be honored to have this be my first, but hopefully not last, Mother's Day walk that I'll be on. And like I said, hopefully I can have my children come along as well. As they get older, make it easier. We're now going to shift over to Ruth Messenger, who we are honored to have here this evening. Ruth Messenger founded the American Jewish World Service back in 1985, which fights poverty and pursues justice all over the world, including in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and in the Caribbean. Through philanthropy and advocacy, this group responds to the most pressing issues of our time: disasters, genocide, hunger, and the persecution of women and minorities across the world. In 2020, they supported 519 grassroots organizations in 18 different countries. And some of the topics of focus include sexual health and rights for women, girls, and the LGBTQI plus people, civil and political rights, land and water rights for Indigenous communities most affected by climate change, and aiding vulnerable communities in the aftermath of devastating natural disasters and humanitarian crises. Ruth, we're honored to have you here this evening. Thank you so much. And we're going to put up the QR code if people are inspired and would like to donate to the American Jewish World Service. All of the proceeds from Karen's catalogs that have been sold throughout the exhibition are being split between these two organizations, the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute and the American Jewish World Service. So that's another way. If you're looking to donate, you can also purchase a catalog. Those are available both in the gallery and online via beacongallery.com. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you, Christine. First of all, let me thank you. Let me thank the Beacon Gallery for this amazing exhibit of Karen's and for committing yourself to ongoing work on social justice. Karen, thank you for your art and for your commitment and your determination to find ways to bring art as an agent for social justice into the public sphere. And then let me say that it's an absolute honor to be sharing this particular honor with Tina, who I got to meet, thanks to Karen and Christine and my daughter Miriam, who was a Boston resident. And Tina, your work and your words are really just extraordinary. Excuse me. Christine, one small fact point: I did not found the American Jewish World Service. It was founded by Larry Phillips and by Larry Simon, who was still at Brandeis. And I was privileged to come there in 1998. You've all heard that we do international human rights work. That may seem like a stretch when we're honoring Dr. King, but I want to say that he defined himself as a citizen of the world and was one of the first people to understand that the excessive commitment to militarism on the part of the United States destroyed the capacity that we had to do good in the world. But I've picked two quotes, and they're not up on the screen because I got my issues in late. But amazingly, one of them tracks exactly what Karen was talking about. So Karen, since you probably have not committed every word of Dr. King's writings and speeches to heart, you might be pleased to know that he said the following: every person of humane convictions must decide on the protest that best suits their convictions, but we must all protest. This I believe to be the privilege and the burden of all of us who deem ourselves bound by allegiances and loyalties which are broader and deeper than nationalism. We are called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for the victims of our nation. No document can make these humans any less our brothers and sisters. So having put Dr. King first in the international realm and then in terms of his commitment to advocacy, I want to share an astounding quote, which I did not know until today, but which I received from many members of Congress in their King emails today. And I want to say I was just stunned, because any issue that Tina is working on, that Karen is advocating, that Christine is fond of, that any one of you on this call are committed to, those issues can only proceed well in this country if we continue to preserve, protect, and enhance our commitment to democracy. And that democracy is very seriously under threat right now, perhaps most dramatically by the assault on people's right to vote. So whatever your issue, we have to be able to move forward in realizing the commitment to every single person being able to vote without obstacles being put in their way. And so here is a quote which I think may surprise some of you as much as it surprised me, not by the content, but by the timing. The quote is, "I think the tragedy is that we have a Congress with a Senate that has a minority of misguided senators who will use the filibuster to keep the majority of people from even voting." Now that sounds like your morning headline, and you know what a serious issue it is, but that is a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King in 1963. So we have our work cut out for us. And again, whatever your issue, yes, you should get engaged with your issue, but for right now, you should do everything you can in your communities and with your elected representatives. The Boston ones are very good, but they all need to hear from us about our commitment to maximizing voting rights and voting protections at a time in which in half the states of this country, those rights are specifically being targeted and under assault, and people are moving to deny vast portions of the population their right to vote. So I think that's the work for all of us. The King family, speaking this week, said, "No celebration without legislation." And I would urge us all to keep that in mind as we celebrate and honor the social justice commitment of the Beacon Gallery, the artwork of Karen, the beautiful, humane commitment of Tina to educate young people in the ways of peace. We need all of us to be sure that we are working to protect the fundamental building blocks of this democracy, which are voting rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. If I can ask kind of a question that comes from a personal place on what you've just said, I am horrified by what I see in terms of the ways in which legislation is being put out to kind of take away voting rights. And yet the way in which our system in the US is set up with the states versus federal, I often feel a little bit powerless, I think, in Massachusetts to do much about it, because it feels like it's often happening elsewhere, like in other states. Can you either disabuse me of that notion or tell me what can I do from Massachusetts to help people whose rights are being taken away from them in, let's say, Georgia or Florida? Because often I feel like I want to do something and I can't figure out what to do.
So the answer is yes on two very different counts. One is the whole intention of long history here, but of bringing back the Voting Rights Act. For those people who are as old as I am, the Voting Rights Act was adopted by the Congress in the 1960s. It was the first serious, just speaking to your issue, the federal effort to oversee what the states were, or as you point out, were not doing, or were doing with malevolent intent. And we had a Voting Rights Act, which authorized and allowed the federal government to interfere when any state was violating voting rights. It is only in the, I guess, two Congresses ago, so 4 or 5 years, that the Voting Rights Act was specifically allowed to lapse, despite the extraordinary efforts, particularly led by Congressman John Lewis, one of my life heroes. And that is the measure that was brought back to the Congress this year. The whole notion of HR 1, HR 40, these were all voting rights pieces of legislation, and they have failed to pass. Now, it's true that your Massachusetts representatives are on the right side, but I think that it requires their best thinking and all of our best thinking to carve out every piece of that legislation that we can possibly get passed. We wanted to do the whole thing. That's not possible, but there are pieces of it that need to proceed. And the Congress needs to be pushed. And I guess that's one more thing I would say. We want these measures to come for a vote because we want people elsewhere in the country to see that many of them, as you point out, have Congressmen people and senators who are specifically in favor of denying people the right to vote. I believe today, it's Wisconsin today, that passed a law to remove drop-in ballot sites to make it harder for people to find a place to put their ballots. That was a legislative act that was passed. So I think that's pushing at the federal level, even knowing that the Massachusetts representatives are by and large on the good side. But I think the other thing is speaking very specifically to the states where other kinds of help is needed. I just see a note in the chat from JALSA that they're going to be doing some work. There are people, Congressman Jamie Raskin, God bless him, organizes Democracy Summer and is sending hundreds of young people into the states where there will be battles over voting rights in 2022. So look up all of these efforts. Don't think there's nothing you can do. If you're committed to voting rights, just go on the web, look for those groups that are doing grassroots organizing in those states. Movement Voter Project comes to mind, but there are 3 or 4 others. There's lots of work to be done. And some of it is to move grassroots efforts at social change, specifically in the states where we have the greatest problems.
Thank you. Thank you for offering those, and to JALSA for also giving some information in the chat that is kind of like specific on here's things that you can do, because I think that, yes, us here in Massachusetts, we can probably help people register from afar. And that's one of the beauties of our internet age. And there have been more kind words and people talking about the inspirational content, and I'll let people read those in the interest of time on their own as we move forward here to get to all of our guests and give them all the time and attention that they deserve this evening. Next up, we have Michelina. So thank you very much, Ruth, and moving on to Michelina here. We are delighted to have Michelina. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm seeing her on my screen. Slowly for everyone. There we go. She has been the curator of What Now Making Space, which is the companion exhibition to Karen's that has been up for the entire time, November through January. But in addition to being a curator, she's also a painter, a calligrapher, and those come together in what's called micrography, which is an amazing type of artwork. So please check out her work online if you have a chance. She's originally from Massachusetts, but recently returned from Florida. And in addition to all of her work as an artist, she is also an activist. She's involved with many nonprofits focused on art and equity. She is a fellow and art director for the James Weldon Johnson Foundation, a board member for diversity and inclusion at the Museum of Fine Arts in Tampa, an advisor for the Kaleidoscope Project, and one of the co-founders for the Community Art Collaborative. And we're very honored to have her with us this evening. So Michelina, welcome.
Thank you so much. Just reflecting on what everyone's already said this evening, I kept thinking about visibility and voice matters. And the quote that I selected, it's a smaller one, but sometimes it's those little nuggets that can stay with us. And the one I chose from Dr. King is, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And I find that being fitting after listening to Ruth and you having that dialogue is, what are our service that we're able to offer to others? I'm 4th generation in this country. My family's from the Cape Verde Islands, and I'm named after my great-grandmother. And so having her namesake, there is this notion of there's a legacy that I must carry. And so the work I do is not of myself, but is of my family and my ancestors and their dreams to come to fruition. And being an artist for me feels like a very unique vehicle, where it's this wonderful space where so many different thoughts and ideas can come together and we can be advocates for growth and for change. This past year, and how Christine and I met, a friend of mine called me very upset about the pandemic. And she was overwhelmed for the grieving process for her children, for her friends, for herself, and just felt helpless. And she wanted to do something. And I said, let's do some art. That always helps me. It's a healing modality for myself. Let's kind of figure out a way to bring that to other people. And so through a series of conversations with the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts, they said, great idea, start a nonprofit. And here's a few dollars to get started. And so we started Community Art Collaborative. And the notion was, how can we safely offer people an invitation to create art, not from a place of skill, but from a place of vulnerability, of questions of how they were processing through all of this social isolation. And so we offered them a template of a honeycomb. And the idea is the beehive is stronger with more honeycombs, right? The more you have, the stronger the structure. And also that each one of us may have gone through this pandemic and this time differently. We've all gone through it together. And us working on this nonprofit led to Christine and I meeting. And we had a conversation about Karen's show that was coming up. And as we all sat and we talked about the hard conversations of identity, of inclusion, of looking at new ways to move forward and what's next and how do we push the needle forward, we came up with this idea of using a space that Karen literally made on the wall of the gallery and had 7 different artists come in and highlight their work. And I want to say their names because, again, I just feel that visibility and your voice matters. And to be able to say someone's name and that be recorded, it's part of legacy building that so many people don't realize how important that is. And I could go on and on about that. We'll save it for another night. But I just want to pay respect and homage to Nyana LaFord, Kamel Peters, Ibrahim Ali Salam, Rob Gibbs, pro-Black, Quincy Harding, Janet Tan, and Michelina. The 7 of us coming together with Karen proved that you can have difficult conversations and learn how to build relationship in an authentic way. We created unexpected bridges. Some lifelong friendships have come through, and all of us are very excited about how can we be more involved? How can we create new types of dialogue and conversation to push the needle forward of identity, of inclusion, of diversity? And I feel honored that I get to do the work that I'm doing. I always feel like if I am serving a greater purpose than myself, and if I am holding the hand of my sister and my brother, then us together are stronger. Just as my parents were freedom fighters, they taught us that it isn't just about your walk alone, but all the others who may not have a voice. How are we able to help facilitate space for that voice and for the visibility that is so important? When I was listening to Clementina and I was hearing about the genesis of her nonprofit and the pain that she endured, and she chose to go through a different path of, instead of bitterness, creativity, I'm reminded of what this past year has done for me personally as an artist. For many years, I felt my voice was stifled of what I had to say as a female, as a Black female, as an immigrant female, as a mother of someone who's endured great loss. And my form of work, using micro calligraphy, these very tiny words, it's a space in which I can unload and unpack beautiful pain. It's healing for me. I think it's healing for those who end up acquiring my pieces. And it's these quiet moments. Oftentimes we feel like we've got to hurry up and find the solution. And through this past year, I think it's been a really great reminder that sometimes it's those quiet, soft moments, the moments where we pause and reflect, where we're able to listen to the greater voice and also listen to each other. And so it's my hope that we continue to have conversations like this, collaborations like this. And moving forward, I'm working on another exciting project that came through conversations at Beacon Gallery, and it's called the Rolo Project, where I'm now working with some artists that are in Tel Aviv, Israel. They have selected 10 artists from that city, And I've selected 10 artists from the New England area. And what we will be doing is having a game kind of like telephone. So the first artist will receive a word, create a piece of art. Then it'll get passed to another artist of a different country. And then they will create their own original work of art based on what they saw. And it will go on until it's gotten through the 10 people. And it's one of those opportunities, again, how are we having new dialogue of connecting and building more bridges for one another? And if you want more information, Christine can certainly get you connected. And we're very excited. Karen will also be playing along on the Rolo project. And I guess the last thing I want to say is the quiet, the pause, the reflection, but also that we have to remember to have a childlike curiosity and not be afraid to play and to look at some new ideas without the concept of the product, but really go through the full process. So thank you for having me and letting me share with you. Back to you, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Oh, are you guys hearing a weird echo? Are we okay? Good. No, Michelina, that was amazing. Loved hearing everything that you're up to, and also put in a little plug to say that Michelina will be having a 2-artist show at Beacon Gallery starting in the fall in September. So you'll be able to be amazed by all her fabulous artwork. And so that's something else that's coming up beyond the Roller Project, which is very exciting. And I'm looking forward to learning about myself more tomorrow. And then I will definitely have things to share with the community at large. The last person we're going to be hearing from, and my co-sponsor for this evening, who's going to kind of tie everything together, is Laura Mandel, who represents JARTS, the Jewish Arts Collaborative. She's the executive director of this group that brings people together to explore and celebrate the diverse world of Jewish art, culture, and creative expression. Art, food, literature, music, and more allow us to better understand the life experiences of others as well as our own, and help build a vibrant and more tolerant future for both our Jewish and Greater Boston communities. And man, do we need that right now. JARTS launched publicly in December 2015 with Boston's first ever Jewish public art project, 8 Nights, 8 Windows. And Laura, I'm going to pass it over to you to tell us a little bit more about your experience and looking back and looking ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine, but really thank you all for letting me just kind of fly in and put a bow on what has been such a beautiful conversation. I mean, really, Karen, Clementina, Ruth, Michelina, Christine, it is my honor to be, be able to make such good trouble with so many incredible women. I think you've all said so much tonight, and I think in some ways it's this magical combination of all of your brilliance and the wisdom you bring to this. So it's all about the policies we're trying to change. It's all about the art you're making and how we can cobble that all together to tell a bigger story. And I just feel so lucky that JARTS is, in our role to be talking about not just the Jewish experience, but how that plays a role in the global experience, and how social justice, or tzedakah, as we would say in Hebrew, is really something that's central to all of us. And so something that's really important to me that I want everyone to know is that this show has sort of been the beginning of a whole project. So not only has this project been inspired by all of the women you've heard and seen tonight, but this is leading towards a project we are calling Be the Change, which is going to be the next JARTS public art project in downtown Boston. And as Karen said, it's going to launch in May, and it will be up for May, June, and July. But what I think is so critical to this project is Be the Change is not just about the artistic vision of any one artist. It's actually taking the vision of what Karen created with these tzedakah boxes for This Humidity Is Not a Spectator Sport project, taking these tzedakah boxes that she's created in honor of Clementina and in honor of Ruth, and turning these into a public art project that is going to be created by 6 different artists here in Boston. And not only is that going to be the kickoff, but then it's going to be traveling. And this project is going to take place in Boston, in Cincinnati, and LA, and possibly beyond. And so we're really excited that when we're talking about where have we been and where are we going, this project started with Karen's vision to create a Sadaka box that, as Ruth so beautifully said to her one day, is about being the change. And how can we start with this very simple concept of how do we be the change? And now we're turning this into this whole huge project where hopefully the entire city and ultimately the entire country can participate in thinking actively about how we can make change. And so when we've talked about some of the active ways that we are thinking about change making tonight, as you saw in the chat, Cindy Rowe, who's the executive director of JALSA, Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action, is a partner on Be the Change. She's been working with us to think about policies that these works of art can relate to, so that when we all come to experience these works of art, these Sadaka boxes or justice vessels, as we're calling them, that we are all going to have active ways to make change. So whether or not we have all of the money we would like to be able to have to give towards charity, there's so many more ways than just giving money. You know, how can we all be active through these works and make actual change? And what I love about the conversation we're having tonight is that even before this project has come to life, I've heard a lot of ways that we can all actively participate in making change and creating a more just world, which is something we've all alluded to. And I just want to recap a couple of things that our panel has said tonight, because for me, this is how we look forward. We can purchase one of the catalogs from from Karen's show, Humanity is Not a Spectator Sport, which outlines a lot of the stories and conversations we've had tonight. You can join us. Christine has a team going. We at JARTS may build another team or join, but for the Mother's Day walk through the Peace Institute, I hope you'll join all of us on Mother's Day. You can give to the Peace Institute Impact Fund. As Ruth mentioned, voting rights are really crucial. Look up grassroots organizations online. Cindy Rowe said if you want to know about issues and get involved in policy change making through JALSA, we can send her email address out after. Stay tuned for the Rolo project that Michelina spoke about, and please stay posted for the Be the Change public art project, because I think that is just one of so many ways we can all do our small part in making a big change. And I just want to say, Christine started off the night by saying, what do you have to give? Well, I hope that in everything we've heard tonight, in that list of opportunities for us all to give, in ways we can all be involved in this public art project, that you've all started to think a little bit more about what you have to give. And because we've been on this theme of going with Dr. King's just most powerful and important thoughts this evening, I just want to say, in 1963, another quote he had in his Strength to Love book is that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of convenience and comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And I just want to say, being surrounded by this screen of women who have all shown what that quote really means, where in times of challenge, they have all stood up and made a difference. And I hope that we can join all of them moving forward to continue to make change all together, because it's the power of all of us coming together for conversations like tonight that really do this work. So I just want to say a huge, huge thank you again to everybody on this screen and for everybody who's with us tonight for, like I said, making it easy for me genuinely as the executive director of JARTS to show up and be able to say that we have this incredible team who are making this change. So please join us when we think about what is coming down the pike. Please join us. Please stay tuned and watch for everybody's art and project. We'll be sending out notes after this. And I just want to say thank you again, all. This has been a really special and powerful way to celebrate today, MLK, in his honor, in his memory. And thank you all so, so much for being here. Thank you, Christine, for hosting us.
Thank you to everyone. Laura, I couldn't possibly have wrapped this up better. So we're going to leave it there for tonight. Thank you to all the panelists. Appreciate everyone's attendance this evening. For any follow-ups, please feel free to contact the person you know best or to reach out to me. We are so honored to have it almost or about more than 50 people have attended this evening. And thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Take care, everyone.